Hello and welcome to Boob Chronicles, where we discuss all things mommyhood and mommydom and breastfeeding. From this title, this video is about ways to improve pumping or things that you're just not doing right with your pumping situation. I've been there, I've done it, I've made almost all these mistakes. Well, not mistakes, but I've had most of these things happen to me or to some of my clients. So I definitely know that the pumping, it can seem easy. Like I have moms that say, oh, well, I'll just pump. But sometimes there's just not a just pumping. It's a whole ordeal and a setup process that can be challenging for some mothers and can sometimes derail their breastfeeding journey. And so I wanted to go over these tips just so you would have some type of resource to fall back on. The first thing that moms do wrong when it comes to pumping is assuming that it's just pumping. Because let's be real, it's going to take about 15 to 20 minutes out of your day. And if you're a mom that's exclusive pumping, so you're pumping every 2 to 3 hours, or if you're just pumping while you're away from baby, while you're at work, then it's still every 2 to 3 hours. So it's taking a considerable amount of your time. And while it doesn't sound like a lot when you say it, while you're doing it, it feels like it's literally sucking the life out of you sometimes. So when we assume, I don't want you to assume that it's just pumping. It is a huge benefit for your baby and a huge benefit for yourself to be pumping, because by pumping every 2 to 3 hours, you are lowering your chances of having clogged ducts. You're lowering your chances of getting, any type of issues with your breast. So it's not just pumping. I want us to get out of that mindset that it's just going to be just this, and it's going to be easy peasy pudding pie, and nothing's going to go wrong, because I guarantee one of these days when you go to pump, you're going to leave one of your pump pieces behind and you're going to be stuck hand expressing. Because I did it. Even as a professional, I left pump pieces that I had to hand express, which isn't bad. Hand expression isn't bad, but that's a whole nother video. Second, the next thing that people do wrong when it comes to breast pumping is they assemble the pump wrong. And it seems pretty straightforward most of the time. But I've walked people through pumping, setting up their pump, and I've walked people through correcting pump issues. And most of the time when they have issues with their pump, it's because they're not assembling it correctly. So I'll walk you through that really, really fast. I have to disassemble my pump real quick. Okay. So the first issue when I see that they're not assembling the pump correctly is they forget this little piece. And this little piece makes a world of difference. It is the membrane. It's this really, really soft piece of well, not soft. It's a silicone piece of fabric. But they either forget it or they don't push it into the right portion of the valve, which is this little piece. So when we put it in, we want to make sure that we press it in like so, and that there's no separation between the white and the yellow. We just want to make sure that everything fits in there properly. Let's get things. There we go. And that it's just on there securely. Now, when I first started pumping, which was in the hospital under an older nurse was advising me to, even though my daughter was latching. Her latch wasn't excellent, but she was latching. They didn't help me with the latch necessarily, but they wanted me to pump, which is backwards. Don't do that. The valve was sticking out ever so slightly, and because of that, my breast it wasn't pumping my breast at all. It was one of the best pumps I would say is out there, which was the Medela Symphony, which is hospital grade. It is the Cadillac of pumps, essentially. And because this little piece was away from the valve, it wasn't pumping my breast. So that's a huge factor in making sure that your pump is assembled properly. Next thing that you want to do is you want to press this into here. I have a hand pump. You can tell it's a hand pump because it goes like that. But if you want to make sure that it's pressed into there, you don't necessarily have to jam it in. Do not hurt your hands trying to jam this thing in because it fits in there pretty well. And then what I like to put on there is a flange. This little doohickey is a flange. And we want to press that in there. And then you can put on your collection bottle. And if you're using a hand pump like this one, then you put on your actual pump. But if you're using a electric pump, then you put the tubing into there. The tubing can actually fit in here. Well, that's why one of the reasons why I like Medela pumping styles is because all of their products are, what's the other? Symphony. It all kind of fits all into one, or even the hand pump can fit into there. But this part cannot fit into like a regular pump piece. But yeah, I like that. So this isn't assembled correctly. That's one of the reasons why it's not working out for you. One of the next reasons why you're not able to pump as much as you think. I need a large flange because I have double E breasts. And I'm like, not necessarily. You know, the flange doesn't necessarily get changed dependent on the breast size. It's more so the nipple size in diameter. So how big the nipple is around. So I brought these for examples. So this is a 24, it says it somewhere in there, 4-inch flange for the Medela, and then this is a 27. Not necessarily the length of it, but the actual size of the hole is what matters the most. Because what happens is we have the nipple that's getting pulled into the flange. Let me put this on here like this. And what we don't want is for the nipple, the actual nipple, to be rubbing up against the inside of the flange. If you see my Haka video, I discussed that a little bit. What happens is it blocks some of the ductal pathways, 1, and 2, it causes friction within this little tube, which is why we have some moms with cracking, bleeding, chapping, and painful pumping. And if pumping is painful, then you're not going to want to do it for long. So that's one of the major things that moms are doing wrong, and why they're not going to get as much milk is because milk can't come out. This little hard shield is going to block that milk from coming out. It's going to affect how much you're able to pump. The next thing that you're doing wrong with your pumping is that you have broken pump pieces. Sometimes pump parts can get broken. I've had clients tell me that their dogs got a hold of some of their pump pieces and they chewed them up, whether the tubing be chewed or something like that by a cat, dog, whatever. That reminds me of that show. I'm old. How to show my age. Anywho, by a cat or a dog or a guinea pig or a rabbit, whatever, it's chewed on your tubing. Cats really love the membrane things. Like they like to take them as they're being cleaned or before they're being cleaned and run off with them. So these go missing a lot, or they get like little puncture holes in them. My daughter got a hold of my membrane once. That was when she was really little. I had gotten done pumping, washed them, and she got a hold of it. Luckily, nothing horrible happened, but I did have to replace this because she had, mauled it with her tiny toddler teeth. Sometimes these get stepped on. Anything can happen. So if you're noticing any type of damage to any of your pump pieces, then it's time to get those replaced. Speaking of replacing pumps, the next thing that could go wrong with your pump is that the parts are just old. I'd say to replace pump parts about every 6 months, just because normal wear and tear happens, especially with those little membranes get taken in and out, and they might rip or tear. Another thing tends to happen is that there's buildup or something, whatever may happen. Nipples change sizes throughout your breastfeeding journey sometimes, and sometimes you need to size down or up depending on those changes. So to replace those pump pieces, especially the tubing, sometimes while you're pumping, your milk is hot. So as it's passing the tubing, sometimes condensation can go into the tubing and can really get stuck in there, and they're a pain and a half to try to clean. So to clean those pump parts is really essential. You're probably thinking, oh my gosh, that's going to get expensive. I started breastfeeding because I wanted to go to the cheaper route. If you are really frugal and you are a part of the WIC program, Women, Infants, Children program, sometimes those agencies will have replacement pump parts for you. If you let them know, hey, I've been breastfeeding for this amount of time, I'm going to work, whatever reason, your pump part isn't working properly, you're not seeing as much as you're pumping. I think this XYZ is broken, or I think I need a different size flange. Sometimes they'll have those replacement parts for you for free. So let them know, especially if you're a part of like any type of breastfeeding group, whether it be community-wise. Sometimes they have those things on the ready for you and you don't even know. And so let them know, see what they have available, see what they have to support you, whether it be any type of literature, actual pumping things, and they'll help you out. The next thing that I see commonly is to why your breast pump isn't working is because it's a second-hand pump. Now, I strongly, I can't emphasize this enough, strongly discourage second-hand pumping, like using a pump that's been used by somebody else. Here's why. Typically, they have pumped, whether it be they've pumped for 2 years with their oldest child and they're handing it down, or they've pumped for a little bit of time. If they pump for 2 years, the motor's going to be worn out. The condensation might have gotten down into the motor, or behind that pump plate, and it's now causing mold. So if you ever see a secondhand pump, lift up, especially if it's a Medeva pumping style, lift up that plate. It's detachable, and sometimes you'll see mold, especially if it's an older pump. Or like if they pumped for a little bit of time and then they've stored the pump away, anything could be behind that little pump plate, whether it be mold, dust, dirt, whatever. Any type of bacteria could be harbored inside that pump. So I'd strongly discourage it. And all of those things can affect how well the pump works. So in these situations, it's typically done because moms don't think that they can afford to get a breast pump. But in most situations, especially here in the US, you can get a free breast pump through your insurance. So it's technically not free, but you know what I'm saying. You can get a breast pump through your insurance with each pregnancy. At least that's how it was. And at least every 2 to 3 years. I think I've seen both. I've seen in my 3 years of doing breastfeeding related things. I've seen you can get a new one every 2 to 3 years, and I've seen one that you can get one each pregnancy. Check with your insurance and see what's available to you. If you can't get it for free, you can most likely get it at a discounted price. If all else fails and you've broken a breast pump, it fell out the back of your car, XYZ, again, you can contact your local WIC office, and sometimes they'll have pumps available for a loan that are hospital grade that those things can't happen to, like mold doesn't necessarily go into the pump. They can be used by multiple people without having to worry about the potential bacteria crossover between moms. And they go through this processing where they are cleaned prior to being reused by other moms inside and out, like thoroughly cleaned. So that's definitely something to look into. The next reason why pumping isn't working as well as you want it to is because you're using your pump settings way too high. There, I said it. You're using your pump settings way too high, and that is why you're not getting as much as you would like. When we think about breast pumping, when we think about breastfeeding, a baby's not going to suck the absolute life out of you. They're not just gonna, like hocus pocus, suck all of the life out of the boob each time that they're trying to suck. So you cranking the pump up isn't necessarily mimicking the baby. Especially with Medela pumping style, they have the letdown function where it starts out really, really low suction and high speed. So like a little butterfly type suckle. And then after you let down, then you can turn up the settings to where it's comfortable. But it's not necessarily to crank it all the way up all the time. Find the setting that works for you and stick with that. If you don't have a Medela pumping style, if you have like a Hygeia or an Even Flow or a Spectra, you can mimic what the Medela pumping style does by doing just that. You can turn down the suction, the vacuum of the pump, and then turn up the speed to where it's that butterfly suckle. And then after you see letdown, after you see the milk start to flow into the bottles, then you can turn down the speed and up the suction. So that'll help to mimic what baby does. Because when baby goes onto the breast, they do that quick butterfly suckle to elicit a letdown. And then after they get a letdown, they do more of a gulp, gulp, gulp. And that's what we want to mirror when we're pumping. The next thing that you're doing is that you're not pumping through multiple letdowns. So as I said before, when baby goes onto the breast, they do that butterfly suckle, then they gulp. What they'll do if they notice that the milk is slowing down and they're not quite finished yet is they'll go back to that butterfly suckle to elicit another letdown. So while you're pumping, you can mirror this by turning on that letdown function again, or turning down the suction and turning up the speed, doing really low suction and really high speed, and see if we can achieve another letdown that way. Typically this takes about 15 to 20 minutes, but it's not an exact science. Your breasts don't necessarily work on a timer. They work by stimulation. There is an internal timer, but they don't know that 20 minutes has elapsed. So we want to mimic the baby as closely as we can while we're pumping, and that'll definitely help with your output. The next thing that you're doing wrong is absolutely nothing. We're not doing anything wrong. Most of the time when we're pumping, we have these really, really inflated expectations as to what we expect to see in those bottles. And this comes from social pressures, seeing what other moms are pumping, seeing freezer stashes full of milk and everything like that. But really, especially if you're exclusively breastfeeding during the day and you're starting that transition back to work, seeing anywhere from half an ounce to an ounce and a half is great. We can do things like massage our breasts as we're pumping to help get more milk, or to stimulate the breast more. But if you're seeing it within that range of 0.5 ounces to 1.5 ounces, and you're just starting to try to build your supply to go back to work, your stash to go back to work, then that's completely normal, and you're not doing anything wrong. Nothing is wrong with you. Nothing is wrong with your pump. You're doing just great. Just continue to be consistent with your pumping. Especially, I'll make a returning to work video is geared towards that. But if you're seeing, sometimes you're just not doing anything wrong, and your body's just not going to respond to the pump and give you 12 ounces in one sitting, because that's ridiculous and painful. And I think that's it. I have enjoyed making this video. I hope this video helps another mom. If you see this video and you're like,